In this video, you're going to learn how to use unconventional watercolor techniques to create these different types of effect. Hola friends, and welcome to my channel. My name is Ingrid from My Inner Palette. I would like to thank you for being here today, and I hope that we have fun together in this upcoming class that I'm going to teach you how to create all these different unconventional watercolor techniques so you can create all these different effects, as you can see, and create wonderful and stress-free art pieces. One of the things that I really like about this unconventional techniques is that you can just go wild. And with that, it comes as well this sensation of being mindful of what you're doing and really enjoying how these different elements are mixing and interacting with the watercolor pigments and water included in the mix, right? So join me and let's get straight into it. As usual, we're gonna start with all the art supplies that you need for this practice. First of all, you need some watercolors. So pick the ones that you have available at home. In this case, I'm gonna be using the ones in pans. You will also need a couple of glasses of water, one for clean water, one for dirty water. Usually when I show the dropper, it's as an optional item, but in this case it's going to be very useful for two of the techniques. You will also need a round brush, like the one that I have here. This is one natural here, but use what you have at home. Cotton bud, if you don't have a dropper, this will come in handy as well. And I would recommend you to have a waterproof pen. In this case, I'm using a pigment liner. If you don't have one, you can also use a Sharpie or even a pencil. We're also going to be using table salt, just a simple white table salt. Then we're going to be using coarse salt. In this case, I had Himalayan salt at home. If you have the white one, it's fine as well. And also a mix of the two of them, so coarse salt with table salt. We're also going to be using alcohol. In this case, I have methylated spirits. It might be called different where you are, so just have a look of what type of alcohols you have on hand. And we're going to be using also bleach, just a normal cleaning bleach. You're also going to be needing a paper towel as usual. And I would like to make a pause here as a health and safety advice. Just be careful because alcohol and bleach are poisonous if ingested. And before we start painting anything and using the techniques, I would recommend you to try to copy the same patterns that I have here over my watercolor paper. So I have 3 spaces differentiated for coarse table salt in a mix of both. Then a specific space for alcohol, bleach, and then another 2 techniques on the bottom. For that, I have been using the pigment liner to create all the shapes that I'm gonna be filling in for each one of the techniques. And this is because it's waterproof. So once we put the water with the watercolors, it's not gonna bleed. And also a reminder that we're using watercolor paper 300 grams and it's cold pressed, so it will take a little bit more water than hot press paper. While you're setting up for your practice, just make sure that everything's on hand, but also that is very comfortable for you to be painting, because otherwise, how can we enjoy a practice, huh? So first we're gonna start activating the pigment on our palette. In this case, I'm gonna be using this violet, and I'm just adding water to reactivate the pigment that has been dried over time. And we're gonna start with the salt and how the salt affects the paint. So we're gonna do the wet on dry technique just to fill in the first square that we have. And while it's still wet, we're gonna be adding salt on top of it. So you need to make sure that when you're gonna be adding the salt, the whole surface is wet. They can be dry because otherwise this technique is not gonna work. So we're gonna be starting off with the coarse salt. So you just need to grab the salt and just drop it right on top of where your wet paint is. And don't move it, just leave it there. For the table salt square, we're gonna be doing exactly the same. So the only difference is the color that we're gonna be using, which I'm choosing a different color, that's all, and that you're gonna be sprinkling table salt on top of the wet surface. And you can choose to add as much or as little salt as you want. If there's any salt around your working area where you're gonna be painting, it would be good if you could grab a clean brush, dry brush, and just clean it up, because whenever you are painting on top of the paper, you don't want to paint on top of the salt, because this will get salt onto your brush, onto your paint, and it's just gonna create havoc, let's say. And yes, you guessed it right, the next square with the mix of table salt and coarse salt is gonna be the same steps. So I'll let you to have a look how this looks like. But in the meantime, you can still see how the coarse salt is starting to look like the table salt that we painted there as well. What are the effects that we're seeing underneath the salt, and they're quite cool and different at the same time. So start observing what's happening when the paint is getting dried. For the alcohol and bleach, we're gonna be doing something similar. So we're still gonna be using the wet on dry technique, and after that having the whole surface, making sure that all the area is wet paint. And we're gonna start using the dropper with alcohol and dropping some drops of alcohol on top of the wet paint. And for the bleach, we're gonna do the same but with bleach. I'm just gonna let you observe the process, and if you have any doubts, just let me know in the comments. Something to be mindful of is that if you're using the same dropper to do this activity, it would be advisable that you clean your dropper before you start using it from alcohol to bleach. So if you use it for alcohol first, make sure that you're rinsing it and then you add the bleach onto the dropper. I hope that makes sense. And just to see how the alcohol interacts with the solution of pigment and water, I really find it mindful. It's like my mindful moment when I watch this. I find it so relaxing. I don't know yourselves, but I love this. Here it goes, the bleach. I find it a little bit less exciting than the alcohol, to be completely frank, but it's still pretty cool to see the effects and how it reacts similar but differently than alcohol. And I would like to leave you with a couple of examples on how you could use these techniques to create some abstract art, or as a mindful practice in which you let go of perfection, you let go of the control of the medium, and just let it act and react and do something crazy and wild. And I find that whenever I'm doing this type of processes, my mind is able to completely disconnect and just be very present on what I'm doing, but not from a controlling freak type of perspective. It's more like, okay, I'll just let go of the control and see what happens and just enjoy the process, which is something that we usually forget nowadays. We are so in tune with everything that we need to be doing, that we haven't done. Where are we going next? And sometimes we just forget of being there, being present on the things that we're doing. Or if we are there, we are trying to control them, right? So this is a really nice way of disconnecting, but again, connecting to yourself, to the moment. As you can see here, I'm using the mixed salt, so coarse with table salt together, and also alcohol. For the bleach, I'm gonna be using obviously bleach, and that's gonna be first, and then I'm gonna be using just a table salt. And after practicing letting go of control, letting go of perfection, we're gonna practice patience, because after doing all of this, we need to let it all dry completely, 100% dry. So it might take a couple of hours or even overnight. And this is due because we're working with salt, and the water will accumulate closer to the salt. So if we start brushing it before it's 100% dry, then we're gonna start smudging it instead of brushing it dryly like we're gonna be doing now. I usually start by rubbing my finger on the salt and trying to loosen it up from the surface, but being very careful that we're not trying too hard to do that. And then once that's done, it's better to brush it off with a clean and dry brush. When it comes to the table salt, because it's so fine, you're gonna find that it's a little bit more tricky or challenging to get it off the paper. So this is why I try to apply a little bit more of pressure, but then try to resources again to the clean and dry brush, because after waiting for so long, you don't want to ruin the paper by scratching it too much. And here I've sped up the recording, so please don't do it as harshly as it looks at this point. And here you can see clearly what are the differences between how the different styles of salt react with the solution of pigment and water. You can see with the coarse, it's very like big splashes. The table salt is very even, and within the mix we have this like bigger spaces, but it's still more even than the coarse, obviously. Here you can see the results with the alcohol. You can see that there's some spots outside of the circle, and this is mainly due to the paper that I was using. It was not 100% cotton paper. And when you look into the bleach, if you remember how it looked like, it was very watery when we were working on it. So it was an excess of water for this type of paper. And what the bleach mainly did in this case is that it started pushing the pigment away from the center. For the mix techniques, I decided to use it as color coding. So the red says that there's alcohol involved, and the yellow means that I was using the mix of coarse salt and table salt. And this is the end result of it. You can see all the shapes that the salt has created. For the bleach and salt, I also did a little bit of color coding. So the green means that I used table salt, and the blue means that I was using bleach. This is just to keep myself on track, right? They never tell you that when you start getting older, you're gonna start losing your memory. But jokes aside, here you can see how the bleach started doing some moving the pigments away, and there's also kind of like a wider type of spot around the middle. And then you can see how the salt also kind of like reacted around where the pigment was. So it looks quite interesting. If you've gotten this far in the video, congratulations. Just remember to leave a comment and then we can interact with each other. Thank you for being here today. If you have enjoyed this video as much as I've enjoyed making it, I'm gonna remind you to please like it, subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet, and also share it with your family and friends. And also, remember to check on the description box where I'm gonna leave you a couple of links as well that you can watch some other videos to help you with your watercolor journey. Have a lovely day. afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world, and see you next time.